So why would you leave your job in midlife? Why do successful people quit at the peak of their career? And what happens next? There's a specific kind of successful man and woman that I keep meeting. He or she has done everything right. They've built something real, got a title, got equity, they've got reputation. All of it's earned, none of it's accidental. And from the outside, that view looks extraordinary, looks successful. But there's a part that nobody sees. He or she is sitting in a meeting that they've sat in 100 times before, and the thing that was barely visible suddenly gets really loud, enough that they can't just mute it anymore, can't just check out. It's not a crisis per se, it's not a breakdown, it's a question. It's an uncomfortable question with an answer that's impossible to unknow. In other words, once you start asking it, it's difficult to stop asking it. This video is for you. If you are having that question, if you're wondering why you're sitting in that meeting, this is for you. If that search for what it means to leave your job in midlife and the panic is setting in, then this video is for you. So, yeah, a lot of us have to deal with the fact that we leave our jobs or our careers not by our own decisions, but by decisions that are made for us. And there are certainly some emergencies that will be facing some people. But I'm talking about people who quit at the top intentionally, who walk away from the thing that they've built or the career that they've climbed, not because it failed, but because it worked. And working, it turns out, wasn't the same as mattering, as meaning. That's a much stronger or stranger thing that needs addressing, and it's worth getting into. The people I work with through the Second Harvest retreats are not in crisis in the conventional sense. Most of them, at least from the outside, have it all figured out. They are founders who have built companies, sold companies, corporate leaders who've climbed the ladder until they ran out of ladder. Executives who hit 50 and then they realize that the scoreboard that they've been playing on their entire careers was actually set up by somebody else. These are not their metrics. And here's the thing about success that you don't really prepare for. Achieving it doesn't answer the question it promised to answer. You thought, if I build this or earn this or become this, then I'll know what it was all for. And then you do, and you realize you don't have an answer. What you actually get, if you're lucky and honest with yourself, is a much better question. Not was it all worth it, but rather, what am I actually doing this for? And that's not a crisis, it's just clarity. There are a few things I hear over and over again in these conversations I have, and they're worth naming directly because nobody else seems to be saying them out loud. There's a lot of bullshit on LinkedIn that talks about jobs and status and management, but you need to stop and say the thing that's really hurting people, and that is there is a lack of meaning in work. And there's a lack of meaning because the job stopped teaching you anything. If you're sitting on that particular fence of change, of retirement, of transition, on average, your life will shorten by about 6 years once you've made that choice. Not because of the loss of income and not because you don't have the resources, because of the loss of mastery, the loss of curiosity. Your brain needs something to sink its teeth into. When it runs out of new territory to explore, your brain can go idle and it can start to feel like it's eating itself. So when you've mastered your industry, your domain, your area of expertise so completely that there's no longer anything really worth learning, then your performance around that thing is going to start feeling hollow. The second thing is your identity that you built around the role will start to feel like a mask, like a costume. And this one's much harder to admit because most of our ego is invested in that status, in that title. The work wasn't just about the job and the money, but it was about how you fit into society, how you belonged, and how you explain your value to your world. At some point, that costume, that mask starts to feel uncomfortable, starts to itch, and you realize you've spent decades optimizing for a version of yourself that other people designed. The market designed it, the industry designed it, your early ambition, which was shaped by how you were raised, that designed it. Those stories are not your stories anymore. And the question that gets a little louder is, who am I when I don't have those roles, those titles, that status, those stories? Third thing that happens is that you stop feeling like you were actually choosing, like you had agency. At Second Harvest, we call this low agency behavior. And it's endemic amongst highly capable people. So they've been spending decades prioritizing clients, their companies, their employees, their shareholders, their families, which all of this is genuinely important for most of us, but it has the strange effect of eroding your sense that your life is actually yours by design. You've built an entire architecture of obligation. And at some point, that architecture is going to start showing the cracks. Okay, so let's talk about what's underneath all of this. Let's name the real scary thing, the fear, because that's where it gets really interesting. It's not really about money. Most men specifically are asking this question, do I have enough? If you're a woman, you might be saying, can I provide? Can I support? It's not the structure. You can always build new structures. The fear is that you step off the platform you've been standing on for 20 years and you won't know who you are. This is an identity problem. Because for so long, what you do and who you are have been the same thing, the same sentence. And that's not some kind of character flaw. It's just what happens. But if you live in a society where that's important, that becomes important. When you spend the first half of your life building something, you build it through the successful completion, and that eventually becomes you. Stepping away from that isn't a career decision, it's an identity decision. And that feels pretty big. So what happens next? Here's what I've seen, both in my own personal experience and through the people that I've worked with at Second Harvest. The transition isn't a fall, it's a gap. And that gap feels terrible before it feels like freedom. And there's a period, and it varies, but it's real, where the absence of the old structure feels like groundedness, like you pulled a thread and everything unraveled. But you're not broken. You're just between the narratives. You're between the stories. The old story is ended, and the new one hasn't quite found its pace yet. This is so normal. It's also where most of the people that come to our retreats start to push through to their next second harvest. Right? That second harvest is what becomes possible when you stop spending your accumulated wisdom or your experience and the resources on somebody else's agenda, and you start spending them on yours. You already have something. Maybe you've got everything. You've got the network, you've got the financial runway, you've got hard-won pattern recognition and experience. And that comes from actually having done things in the world. The question isn't whether you have material or resources. The question is, what are you going to build with them? And this time, maybe for the first time, you get to choose. So we need a practical bridge to get from what works to what will work. And a few things that have actually helped from the people that I've observed and spend time with and advise, is that you need to start running experiments before you do something dramatic. And what I say is, this is a thin slice experiment. The worst version of a change is something that happens to you. It's dramatic and you have no control over that. And the best version is a series of small bets. These could be fractional roles, advisory work, side projects, creative work to unlock something that you haven't done for a while, spending time with others, going on retreats, having conversations with people who are living the life that you're living. That gives you the actual insights that you need above the noise of the anxiety of, oh my God, what's going to happen next? You need to subtract before you start adding anything. Because most people in transition will immediately try to fill the gap with something new. Maybe it's another board seat. Maybe it's another side project. Maybe it's just the busyness that creates the anesthesia and distracts you from the ambiguity. The people who navigate this best tend to do the opposite. They start stripping away. They find out what's actually underneath all of the noise. And genuinely happy people are doing less. This is research. Not because they're lazy, but because they've got really clear about what actually deserves their attention. You also need to find the right room. This is one I feel really strongly about. The conversations you're able to have depend on who is in the room. Most of the men I know are sitting on this question, but they're sitting on it alone. They're discussing it with people who have no idea what they're talking about or what they're going through. You need to be around people who are living the question with you, not people who will give you their answer, their version, but people who will make your questions feel less like pathology and more like an invitation for that experiment, for whatever's coming next. I left the thing I built, not because I failed, because I wanted to find out what I was capable of when I wasn't operating inside someone else's idea of success. I wanted to bet on myself. That decision cost me my old story, cost me my old life. But I would make it again without hesitation. Not because it was easy, but because I found true alignment with who I am. And if you're sitting with this question right now, the one that keeps showing up every day, asking you, what is it that you're doing with your life? I would encourage you not to solve it quickly or dramatically. You don't have to blow up everything. You don't have to make one big move, but you do need to start. You cannot ignore it. You cannot stop, thinking about this question and just put it aside. That question is trying to tell you something, and it's worth sitting with it long enough to actually hear what it's trying to tell you. If any of this landed with you, there's tons more where this came from. I write about this regularly on Second Harvest LinkedIn. I run retreats periodically with my partner Devin, and this is specifically for those people who are navigating this kind of midlife transition. It is not therapy. It is not self-help. There is no guru there. This is more like a design lab for your next chapter. So subscribe if you want to keep exploring this, and leave a comment, and I will read all of them. See you on the next one.